Today's topic is feminist theories, a sociological approach. In today's class, we'll try to understand how, through different sociological concerns, questions, problems, we can understand feminism. At the same time, we'll also try to understand how feminism, as a social concern, how feminism gives us a different perspective of the society. We'll try to see how sociological concerns, and by that I mean sociology in terms of academy, also in terms of society, nation, state, etc., how feminism gives us another or a different perspective to understand these concerns. We have to understand that when we are talking about feminism, we are talking about something like a prism. We are not talking about a discipline. We are not saying that it's feminist academia or it's a feminist feminism department, like we say literature department, cultural studies department, social science department. We are not saying that. Rather, what we are trying to say is that feminism is like a prism, and through feminism, one can see and look into different concerns and different problems of different disciplines. And as today's concern, sociology, sociological approaches. Let me first begin with a definition like a statement. I'm not saying this is an ideal definition of feminism, but we'll start with a definition like a statement, and I'll try to explain what do I mean by that. Feminism is a multidisciplinary approach. As I said, it is like a prism. It is not one discipline per se. It has a multidisciplinary approach towards other disciplines as well, because you will hear when you are doing your higher studies, you are doing your research in the future, you will see that feminist economics, feminist science, feminist literary studies, feminist cinema studies, feminist sociology, so on and so forth, different departments can be approached through feminist concerns and pursuits. Which is why I'm trying to say is that feminism is a multidisciplinary approach to sex and gender equality, understood through social, philosophical, cultural theories, and political activism. Now, this is very important, that along with theoretical understanding of how gender, sex-gender relations, difference, how this thing function in the society, it's not only to be understood through theoretical understanding, political activism is also a major part of feminism. There are feminists who constantly struggle, take to the streets, go for, lobby with the government, try to influence policy making, etc., with government, with NGOs, with different activists, etc. So there is this practice part as well as the analytic and academic part. Feminism has both of it. So these are theories. There are also cultural activism around feminism. Historically, feminism has evolved in the critical examination of inequality between sexes to a more nuanced focus on the social and performative construction of gender and sexuality. So this is the beginning where I'm locate what we are going to do today. That is, we'll try to understand how sex and gender, the sex-gender division, how it functions in the society, how feminism helps us to understand this gender-based differences and discrimination. At the same time, we'll also try to see how gender affects our everyday social performances. That is, how am I behaving? I mean, what are the clothes I'm wearing? What are the ways that I move my hands, how I behave in front of the others, whether it is different between a man and a woman, the major quote-unquote two differences that the society believes that gender has. Again, you can see that there are some points that I'm trying to elaborate, and this is something that I'll just mention so that it remains in your mind as an information that what feminism does. So it is definitely one of the major thing is to establish a world without sex-gender biases, sex-gender-based discrimination, sex-gender-based oppression, so on and so forth. Definitely, this is something that feminism constantly tries to fight. That, there should not be any marginalized people, the society should be equal, and we move and we work towards that equality. As a tool, That is, as methods, feminists use different socio-political movements. There are different movements that had happened across the centuries, the history of feminism. If we trace it back to the first wave of feminism, we'll see that, suffragette movement for right to vote, suffragette is right to vote, movement for right to education, so on and so forth. All these things, which finally, ends at change of certain policies, etc. These things happen through these movements. So feminists use these movements as a tool. Feminists also use theories as a tool to make us understand or to make us realize how even within academic practices certain gender biases actually exist. Feminists also believe that because in the society men remain at the center of the society, they access a lot of power. What feminism tries to do is try to understand that whoever is not in that center, that means whoever is more towards the margin, feminists try to talk about that. So post-third wave feminism, the contemporary feminism, tries to, emphasize more on intersectionality. So it is not only about women being in the marginal. These feminists also try to talk about other marginal identities as well. So maybe caste-wise, class-wise, gender-wise, there is an intersectionality, and feminism tries to talk about that marginality, keeping in mind the gender as well. Feminism also tries to identify, and this is a very common word that all of you must have heard and used almost every day, that is the word called patriarchy. We'll try to discuss what patriarchy is in coming sections. That feminism identifies patriarchy as a system that operates in a certain way that perpetrate systemic oppression against one gender. This is important. Patriarchy, where systemic oppression happens. So with all these basic understandings and basic idea on what feminism is, let us move on. Some of the basic concerns that feminism posits. The major concerns. This is not all-inclusive. This is not exhaustive, because there are so many different number of concerns that the issues that feminists should be concerned with. But I'm trying to only talk about few of the social concerns. One is the right to vote. We have to understand that women did not receive the right to vote from the very beginning. And by beginning, I mean when human civilization started voting, when democracy actually came to different countries and etc. However, for India, the case is different, because unlike in the West, unlike in some of the Western countries, India has a long colonial past. And also at the same time, our 19th century already initiated certain changes in terms of women's life, women's education, so on and so forth. So in India, we did not actually have to fight for the right to vote after our independence. And you should understand what does it mean by to the right to vote is that having access to the public life, to be able to mark or register your point, your vote, your support to any public event. That can be election for government, that can be election for any other factors. Women should have the right to vote. This was the first, one of the initial struggles that women started with. Then, of course, education, that every woman or every girl child should have equal right, same right as that of a male child to have equal access to education. Also hold public office. This is important, that women literally had to struggle a lot to have a proper job. And by job, it doesn't only mean having job in unorganized sector, but also in holding a public office. That is being representative, being chosen by the community as a leader. Could be a mayor, could be an MP, could be an MLA, could be chief minister, president, prime minister, and whatnot. So holding a public office, that means you have a woman representative who is also participating in policy making. This is the ideal questions that feminism always tries to address. Again, women's employment and equal pay, we have to understand that, however, in organized sector, people are trying to control it a bit, but in unorganized sector, for example, things are still the same, that men and women do not get same or equal pay for the same amount of labor they actually perform. So men are given more salary, women are given less. Even in corporate sectors or in some sectors, even in the organized sectors, where salary can be bargained, salary is not fixed for a position, salary can be bargained. It has been seen and noted by through statistics and everything that women, through bargain, women tend to receive less amount of money in terms of their pay. Again, women should have ownership of property, should be able to own land. It might sound funny at this moment that these are very basic questions, but you have to understand that it's hardly 50, 60 years ago that women literally couldn't inherit the father's property. So this is very important. Maternity leave, that a woman who's pregnant should be given certain amount of days leave so that the man and the woman both has the right to have a family. Women's equal partnership in marriage, that marriage should not be understood in terms of power. Man should not have excess amount of power in marriage. Women should also have equal say and share in marriage. This is also something that feminists talk about, try to argue about. Identifying domestic work as labor. This is important because for feminists, it is very important to identify something as domestic work and care work as labor. Through economic perspective, it is mostly said that women are double burdened with labor. So if there is a woman who's working outside, that is working in an office, and a woman who, that woman lives in a family, so when she comes back home, she has way more labor to perform at home than the male partners. However, we again have to be aware that when we are talking about this, we are talking about the 100% of the population and the majority of it. Definitely there are changes that are happening. Families, friends near us, near you, you might have seen that your parents, your father, your male friends might be now being more understanding. They are taking part in their household work, sharing their work, domestic work, etc. But we also have to understand that if we take India, for example, us as a small community we don't represent India. There is a huge, large number of population who are still practicing these things where men and women are so differently prioritized. And most importantly, the reproductive health of women. In most of the rural, reproductive health of women are not properly taken care of. Domestic labor is not shared when a woman is pregnant. Again, proper nutrition, health care. This is, again, as you see, it is very intersectional. It is gender question as well as economic and other questions as well. So a woman not getting proper nutrition, proper health care, etc., is very important concern for feminists. And as I'm trying to, I wouldn't be able to be exhaustive in terms of the list, but the final point that I would want to point out is gender-based, sex-based violence and trauma on women. And there are multiple different degrees of such violence. It can be domestic violence to sexual harassment, to cases of unfortunate cases of rape and violence, etc. also is something that feminists constantly fight about. Now, as I was saying, if we try to have a very basic understanding of the history of feminism, there are 3 waves of feminism, but at present, people are also arguing there is a 4th wave of feminism that started happening, that started with the recent Me Too movement. However, it has not yet been theorized, it has not yet been, finalized, but in general, at present, we can say that there are 3 waves of feminism. We may or may not consider Me Too as a movement, as a wave in feminism. For that, a little more, nuanced and proper understanding and argument would be necessary, but we will consider that as a major event in our recent history. The first wave is 19th and early 20th century. It began, and as I said, it began with suffragette movement. Suffragette is the right to vote. Now, the first wave of feminism mostly tried to talk about, inclusion. That is, okay, you had forgotten women. I mean, their position would be that, okay, society, you had forgotten women, you have deprived them for so many years and since eternity, but if you give us a chance, you should give us a chance so that we can take part in our public affairs. We should be able to vote. Given proper chance, we should like education and other things. We can also flourish. So theoretically, or rather conceptually, first wave of feminism is known as liberal feminism. Second wave of feminism started from 1960s. We call that radical feminism. This is the moment when feminists started celebrating their difference. They are no more talking in terms of the liberal feminists. They are not saying that, okay, give us chances so that we can become, we can also participate and etc. Instead, second wave of feminists said that men and women are different. We should celebrate this difference. We do not want to be like somebody. We should be celebrated. We should be given chances on the basis of our difference only. So they are also talking about an equal society, but at the same time, they are perhaps what they are doing is also talking about the idea of equity. Say, for example, this is a common meme that you might have accessed. I mean, you might have seen in your social media accounts and everything. There is a meme you have seen that, there is a fence and there is a game happening, or any particular play that is happening, and some people are trying to watch from the fence. And you can see that the one who is the shortest needs a box, stands on it, and the one who's the tallest doesn't need one. So that is what radical feminists tried to say, is that depending on the differences, certain policies need to be made, because this is the equal share of population in the world. So just because two genders are different, you cannot shape the rules and policies according to one gender. You have to understand that there are two genders, and the policies have to address both the genders. One of the major achievement of this second wave feminism was maternity leave, where they argued that it is important for a woman to have a maternity leave, and because a woman can go for a maternity leave, you don't actually appoint women. This doesn't make any sense, because if a man has a right to have a family, that can only be ensured by giving the woman the maternity leave. Otherwise, how will the man and the woman both, they will have the right to have a family, The state always celebrates family as an ideal structure. So this was the second wave of feminism, which we also know as radical feminism. Third wave of feminism started from 1990s, which was very different, that it tried to understand or identify the question of diversity. It also tried to question the practice of feminism itself. It tried to see that how, for example, a Western feminist concern will be different from a third world feminist concern, how a black feminist concern would be different from a white feminist concern, so on and so forth, which is why third wave, the idea of gender becomes very important. LGBTQI communities become important, and gender as a category slowly started growing. So the major concerns of third wave feminism, which is still continuing, is individuality, diversity, plurality of women's issues. And as I said, if we consider Me Too as the fourth wave, there is still a question. This is something that you already know. The Me Too movement started in 2017, where people started calling out, if any sexual perpetrator's name is being called out, other women also, join the force with a hashtag called Me Too. Before Me Too, one major incident actually happened in Nirbhaya case. Nirbhaya case happened at a moment where people took their social media walls and timelines and wrote a lot of protest works, etc., along with the other protests that happened. This is also considered one of the important moment in Indian history where women slowly understood that, that how social media can be used for, showing outrage, protest, and etc. So this is still a wave in making, but yeah, it can be considered as a fourth wave if we have to. And before getting into our next section, I would want to re-emphasize and I would want you to remember the fact that when we talk about feminism, we are talking about prism. We are not talking about a discipline. It is a prism through which, it's like you know what a prism is, that you send a light through a prism, it takes multiple directions through reflections and refractions. So same with feminism, it is like a lens through which you see these different disciplines and etc. Come to our concluding section. As an introduction, let me give you two concepts which you should start thinking about. This should help you with your further studies and pursuits. That is the idea, some words, some keywords that we always encounter while talking about feminism, while writing about feminism, but most of the time we use it very colloquially. So instead of that, it is important for us to be aware what does these words mean. So I will just now we'll try to talk about only those three terms. Now, I would refer to a book called Feminist Thought, Androcentrism, Communication and Objectivity by a writer, Shefali Moitro. She is a philosopher. The first chapter of that book is called Sex Gender System, where she talks about three broad forms of misogyny. Now, these are the words we use, and I want you to be aware. Whenever next time we use this word, I want you to be aware and use it properly. So before getting into the three broad section of misogyny, let's first understand what misogyny is. And I'm summarizing from Shefali Moitro, and also I'm giving you my personal understanding. Misogyny is pure and simple women hating. Any statement, any action that you see or witness which directly harms women or directly targeted against women, like hate crimes, hate speech, including direct humiliation of women, is known as misogynist comments or misogynist act. It is an act of overt disrespect, overt, mind you, underlining the word overt, or discrimination against women. It has been practiced for thousands of years, can also be found in art, literature, and other practices also. You may find a very misogynist text, a misogynist cinema, a misogynist literature, so on and so forth. Misogyny, as I just now said, and we know that leads to heinous crime against women, sexual violence, harassment, and whatnot. Ultimate aim of misogynist act is to control women, keep them demotivated, and never let them take the power position. Misogyny is behind refutation of feminine qualities. Misogynists will always try to make you understand that anything that is feminine is bad, it is inferior, most importantly, and etc. So according to Shefali Moitro, there are three broad forms of misogyny. First, she says sexism. Now you get the idea, right? Sometimes we use misogyny and sexism interchangeably. Sometimes we say misogyny and patriarchy interchangeably. These are not interchangeable words. These are different meanings. Sexism is actually a form of misogyny. So I'm quoting from Shefali Moitro. This form of hating, oppression, discrimination, intimidation is easily identifiable, and so on and so forth. So, sexism is that form of misogyny which you can directly identify. That somebody is on your face telling you that women students do not perform well certain sections of academia. So, these are direct sexism. That is, it is coming from a preconceived notion, not from a proper nuanced data. The next form of misogyny that Shefali Moitro talks about is patriarchy. Now, patriarchy again is a form of misogyny, but this is not perpetrated by one person per se. This is done by a system. So, patriarchy is a structure. as I quote from Shefali Moitra, it is the second form of misogyny in patriarchy, institutions, and customs are conducive to male supremacy. By gaining institutional social support, sexist practices are further entrenched in patriarchy. This is important. That there is a system, for example, family, other institutes, so on and so forth, nation, state, that it itself is patriarchal in nature, and patriarchal society only enhances sexism because sexism can only grow and flourish in patriarchy. And the third form of misogyny that she says is phallocentrism. This is a form of discrimination against women at the conceptual level. Phallocentrism is not something that you can easily identify. This is very conceptual in that sense. So if sexism is discrimination at the level of speech, that is some speech or action that somebody is saying or acting in a very sexist way, patriarchy, on the other hand, is structural. That there is a system, there is a structure which is conducive to men and is very oppressive towards women. Phallocentrism is a conceptual male domination. That is, through argument, through reasoning, you are not overtly saying that women are bad or women are incapable. Instead, you try to place an argument, justify, as if you have a very neutral point of view, but end of the day, you end up marking women, feminine values as inferior. One example, quick example, is what feminists believe is a question of humanism. That many a times you will find that there is a question that people say that let's not opt for men and women altogether. Let's think about humanity. So in that way, equality can be achieved, no more divisions and etc. But feminists have argued that even if you talk about humanism, in most of the cases, the values that are marked as human values are most of the times are male values. Values that are not considered to be a good human value are most of the time, for example, the values that you find among feminine or women. Which is why, this is where phallocentrism can be located, that there is an argument. Through argument, you try to place a very misogynist position. So far, we had discussed what are the concepts and the concerns of feminism is. Then we also try to understand the different, at different times of history, what are the different concerns of feminism has been. Then we discuss the three waves of feminism. And we end the class with the three broad forms of misogyny through Shefali Moitra, and we understand what misogyny is. That's it for today. Thank you.